The first time my family asked me for money that month, it was for my older brother's engagement ring. The second time, it was for my mother's apartment maintenance fee. The third request arrived before breakfast and somehow included both of those expenses plus a luxury honeymoon deposit. My name was Yoon Jae-min, 24 years old, electrical maintenance technician, and the person my family described as dependable whenever they wanted a transfer. I lived in a rooftop room with a leaking window while paying half the expenses of a 4-bedroom apartment where nobody had saved a bed for me. My official salary looked respectable only until every family transfer, debt payment, and emergency request was subtracted. I knew the exact price of bus fare, instant noodles, and delaying a dentist appointment because somebody else's crisis had been declared more urgent. My older brother, Yoon Sung-go, called the arrangement temporary. He had been temporarily unemployed for 3 years, temporarily preparing several businesses, and temporarily borrowing my identity whenever lenders asked for someone with regular income. My mother, Yoon Hye-ja, never called it borrowing. She said families did not keep accounts. She said that while maintaining a notebook listing every favor she believed I owed her for being born, fed, educated, and allowed to work instead of attending university. My younger sister, Sumi, was the only person who occasionally looked embarrassed. She was 19, studying architecture, and still financially trapped inside the same apartment. Whenever mother pressured me, Sumi washed dishes more loudly than necessary and disappeared into her room. Sumi had learned the family's financial weather better than architecture. She could predict which dinner would become a request by the way mother arranged side dishes and whether Sung-go arrived wearing his expensive watch. That morning, Sung-go placed a loan guarantee form beside my soup. He wanted 200 million won for a franchise cafe with gold-plated cups, imported marble, and no confirmed location. He said my signature was a formality because investors already loved the concept. I asked why investors needed my salary if they loved it. Sung-go told me technicians understood wires, not business. Mother said refusing would ruin his engagement and embarrass the family. His fiancé's parents believed he already owned 3 cafes. I had covered his credit cards twice. I had repaid a loan he opened using an old copy of my identification. I had paid mother's surgery deposit, Sumi's tuition gap, and the legal fee when Sung-go's previous business partner accused him of fraud. Nobody had forced my hand with threats. They used disappointment, silence, and the suggestion that decent sons volunteered before being asked. That made each payment look like my choice while ensuring refusal felt like betrayal. Every payment arrived with gratitude that lasted until the next request. My usefulness had become the family's most renewable resource. I pushed the guarantee form back. Mother asked whether some woman had turned me against them. Sung-go asked whether I enjoyed watching him fail. Sumi looked at me, then slowly put her spoon down as if preparing for an earthquake. I said I would help them review a smaller, realistic business plan, but I would not guarantee another debt. Sung-go tore the document in half, though he had printed 3 copies. Mother stood and told me a son who calculated family loyalty did not deserve family support. I almost laughed. Their support currently consisted of eating food I paid for while explaining why my room was too small, because I lacked ambition. Then my phone displayed a screen I had never installed. Unpriced value system activated. Below the message appeared a single question. Would you like to continue exchanging measurable labor for unmeasured obligation? I assumed Sung-go had added some financial scam application to my phone. I tried closing it. The screen remained. A second message appeared. Boundary recognized. First recovery opportunity available. Restore abandoned value without exploiting current users. The system displayed an address in Guro District, 3 subway stops from my workplace, and a countdown of 6 hours. The screen carried no logo, account request, or advertisement. Its letters floated over my wallpaper as if the phone had become a window rather than a device. Even after I removed the battery, the message remained faintly visible on the dark glass. I left the apartment before Mother could begin crying. Sung-go followed me into the hallway and said he would remember this when he became successful. I told him memory was free, so he should take as much as he needed. The address belonged to Haydam Apartments, a 30-year-old complex scheduled for partial demolition. Its basement contained 80 backup batteries installed after a fire years earlier. The management office had declared them dead and paid a contractor to remove them. I knew the contractor. They charged disposal fees, extracted reusable cells, and resold them without sharing value with residents. The system highlighted each battery with a green outline only I could see. Recoverable capacity, 63%. Current recognized value, 0. Fair restoration requirement, resident consent, hazard inspection, transparent revenue share. The system was not offering free money. It was giving me a problem everyone else considered worthless. I called the apartment manager and offered to test the batteries at no charge. He assumed I wanted scrap rights. I showed him a simple agreement stating that any profit would be split with the residents after costs. An elderly resident named Kim Bok-soon read every line. She asked why a young technician would share money nobody knew existed. I said because I wanted access legally. She said that answer sounded less suspicious than kindness. Haydam's residents had spent years paying maintenance fees, while contractors classified anything old as waste. Their basement smelled of dust, rust, and money that existed only for whoever understood the equipment better than they did. For 5 hours, I tested swollen cells, cleaned terminals, and separated dangerous units. 29 batteries could still store power safely. Together, they held enough electricity to run the apartment's emergency lights and elevators for several hours. The system marked the restoration complete. A digital envelope appeared on my phone containing ownership rights to a dormant software license called GridNest. The company that created it had dissolved, but its code could connect different battery brands into one virtual power network. I expected points, coins, or impossible cash. Instead, I received paperwork, source code, and the responsibility to make it useful. I realized the system would never make me rich by dropping cash into my account. It would keep placing doors in front of me, then force me to negotiate with the people already standing behind them. The next message explained the system's rules. It identified neglected economic value. If I restored that value fairly, legal ownership opportunities would become visible. If I stole, coerced, or hid material risk, rewards would freeze. Then came the strangest rule. Affection cannot be purchased. Any disclosure of wealth intended primarily to secure loyalty, obedience, romance, or forgiveness will trigger visibility tax and suspend future recovery. I stared at the screen. The system apparently understood my family before meeting them. That night, Haydam Apartments suffered a neighborhood blackout. The restored batteries kept emergency lights, water pumps, and one elevator running. Mrs. Kim used the elevator to reach her husband, who required an oxygen concentrator on another floor. Mrs. Kim refused to let me work alone. She recruited 2 retired electricians, brought barley tea, and wrote every battery serial number by hand. The restoration became a resident project before it became my first business. The building's video spread online. Reporters praised the old batteries nobody had wanted. A municipal energy officer asked who built the network. I used the name Morrow Grid because every serious company seemed to need a name suggesting tomorrow. My actual office remained a folding table in my rooftop room beside laundry that never dried properly. GridNest's original programmer, Park Haben, contacted me after seeing the news. He was 26, unemployed, and furious that his former investors had abandoned the software while keeping his final salary. Haben later told me the license had once been valued at almost nothing because investors wanted a consumer application with subscription fees. Connecting old batteries for residents had seemed too slow, too regulated, and too difficult to advertise. I offered him half the software company after recovering his unpaid wages from its remaining account. He asked whether I understood negotiation. I said no, but I understood what happened when people built value and someone else called it generosity. Haben joined Morrow Grid. Our first product connected neglected backup batteries in old buildings and paid residents whenever the city used stored power during demand peaks. The system rewarded each fair connection with more opportunities, expired maintenance rights, abandoned patents, and used transformer contracts, and forgotten municipal pilot licenses. None made me rich alone. Together, they formed an infrastructure map hidden beneath Seoul. Within 3 months, Morrow Grid managed enough stored electricity to power 12,000 apartments for 1 hour. A utility company offered us a balancing contract worth more money than I had earned in my entire life. The utility contract included penalties large enough to bankrupt us if the network failed during peak demand. Haben wanted to celebrate. I spent the evening checking every apartment connection because wealth had arrived disguised as responsibility. I signed through a blind holding company created by attorney Choi Yujin, a debt rights lawyer Haben knew from a labor case. She became the first person to know the system's financial scale, though not its supernatural source. Our first major payment arrived, for 8 billion won. I remained in the rooftop room. The system warned that sudden visible spending would attract people before I could distinguish care from access. It did not tell me to lie. It told me every disclosure had consequences. I opened a separate bank account, hired an accountant, and spent 2 hours staring at the balance. The number did not feel like mine. It felt like a mistake the banking system might correct once someone noticed my name. I chose secrecy anyway. When Mother called, I told her I had refused overtime and my income would decrease. That part was true. Moro Grid paid me through the holding company, not my technician salary. Mother became silent, then asked whether I could still transfer the apartment fee by Friday. She did not ask whether I could afford food. I considered telling Mother enough to ease her anxiety. Then I remembered that every previous increase in my income had become a new family baseline within weeks. Relief was never allowed to remain relief. It was converted into capacity. Sungo sent a voice message saying difficult times proved why family members should invest in one another. He attached a revised guarantee form. Sumi called separately that evening. She asked whether I had enough for rent. When I said yes, she transferred 50,000 won anyway and told me not to return it until my window stopped leaking. The system displayed no reward, no loyalty score, and no message naming her sincere. I was strangely relieved. Measuring her kindness would have cheapened it. I used her transfer to buy sealant and repaired the window myself. Moro Grid expanded through laundromats, apartment basements, neighborhood supermarkets, and small factories with unused batteries. Every contract showed revenue shares in plain language. Growth was slower than predatory acquisition and faster than anyone expected. The first supermarket contract nearly failed because the owner feared residents would drain his batteries during emergencies. We created priority rules letting each site reserve essential power before sharing the rest. Fairness required more engineering than generosity. A summer heat wave pushed Seoul's grid near collapse. Our distributed batteries activated automatically, preventing rolling blackouts across 2 districts. News channels began calling Moro Grid the invisible power plant. Investors offered absurd valuations. I accepted funding only from a pension cooperative and a municipal climate fund. The system unlocked a portfolio of old battery cooling patents after we guaranteed residents could leave the network without penalties. Several venture firms offered faster expansion if we replaced resident revenue shares with fixed rental payments. Their spreadsheets showed larger margins. The system marked every proposal with the same warning: value transfer disguised as efficiency. On paper, my stake became worth 80 billion won. At home, Mother asked me to borrow money from coworkers because Sungo's fiancé wanted a larger wedding hall. I said no. She accused poverty of making me selfish. Sungo's cafe plan collapsed before opening. His fiancée postponed the wedding after discovering he had exaggerated his assets. He told the family I had sabotaged him by refusing the guarantee. Mother held an emergency family dinner and placed my childhood photographs on the table. She described every sacrifice she had made. Then she asked me to take a personal loan so Sungo could repay deposits before his reputation disappeared. Mother's photographs included birthdays where I had been absent because I was working overtime to pay for the food on the table. She remembered the cake, the candles, and my duty. She did not remember why I was missing. I said reputation built with borrowed documents was already gone. Sungo threw a cup against the wall. Sumi flinched. Mother told me to leave if I could not behave like a son. This time, I did not leave in anger. I collected the remaining identification copies from her drawer, photographed the torn guarantee forms, and changed every financial password before walking out. Sumi followed me to the stairwell. She apologized for not defending me sooner. I asked her not to turn one honest moment into a permanent promise. She looked confused. I was already thinking like the system, suspicious of affection before it could become obligation. She said she did not need permanent. She needed me to know she thought they were wrong tonight. That answer stayed with me. Attorney Yujin helped me freeze unauthorized credit checks. We discovered Sungo had submitted an online application using my employment records one day before I refused the guarantee. Yujin showed me a credit report filled with inquiries I had never authorized. Sungo had treated my identity like a household tool kept in a common drawer. The discovery made every future request feel less accidental. The lender had rejected it because my official salary was too low. Ironically, hiding my wealth protected me from a larger forged debt. I reported the application. Mother begged me to withdraw the complaint because criminal records would destroy Sungo's future. I asked what his future had been using to finance itself. She said brothers should solve problems privately. Yujin later explained that privacy was where financial abuse grew strongest because victims feared embarrassing the family more than perpetrators feared consequences. Yujin also insisted that I document mother's pressure rather than reduce everything to Sungo's fraud. She said financial abuse rarely operated through one villain. It survived through people who normalized, excused, and redirected consequences. Sungo agreed to repay fees and signed a legal undertaking. I suspended the complaint rather than canceling it. One more attempt would activate prosecution automatically. He called the agreement blackmail. I told him boundaries often felt like blackmail to people accustomed to access. Moro Grid hired 40 technicians. I insisted on fixed overtime limits, transparent performance pay, and worker seats on the safety committee. Haben complained that I wrote employment contracts like someone expecting betrayal. I said I wrote them like someone raised by unpaid invoices. Our operations manager was Kong Arium, 25, former emergency dispatcher, and the only applicant who asked what would happen when residents needed their stored power during a city request. Arium's interview lasted twice as long as planned because she kept asking who could disconnect a hospital, who approved emergency overrides, and what happened when profit conflicted with local safety. Haben hired her before she left the room. Most candidates focused on profit forecasts. Arium focused on who lost electricity first. She joined before knowing I owned the company. To almost everyone, I was field lead Lee Jae-min, a technician with unusual access to management. Attorney Yujin and Haben used my full authority privately. Arium corrected my field plans, rejected unsafe expansion, and brought homemade rice rolls when crews worked late. She also charged everyone for ingredients through the shared meal account. I liked that she was generous without pretending costs disappeared. One rainy evening, our van broke down outside a luxury dealership. A salesman recognized Moro Grid's logo and offered Arium a test drive because he assumed she was the executive. He handed me the umbrella. The dealership's glass walls reflected our rain-soaked uniforms against rows of polished cars. For a moment, I saw the life I could reveal with one purchase. Then Arium asked whether the tow company accepted employee discounts. Arium returned the keys and said the company executive was probably some nervous person hiding behind spreadsheets. I asked why nervous. She said anyone building that much hidden infrastructure either feared attention or enjoyed control. I asked which was worse. She said fear became control when nobody else could inspect it. The system displayed a warning. Concealment now affects informed trust. I closed the message. By winter, Moro Grid's valuation exceeded 1 trillion won after securing a national demand response contract. Financial media searched for the anonymous founder behind our holding company. Newspapers estimated the founder's age, nationality, and education. One article insisted he was a former Chaebol executive. Another claimed Moro Grid belonged to foreign intelligence. Nobody guessed the man repairing basement breakers for overtime. I bought no mansion, sports car, or designer watch. I purchased a small commercial building through the company and converted the upper floors into technician housing at cost. Mother saw an online article estimating Moro Grid's founder had become a billionaire. She called the founder a genius and said I should learn from men willing to take risks. I was repairing the apartment's old breaker box while she said it. I had returned because Sumi reported sparks near the kitchen. Mother thanked me by asking whether I could also pay the electrician who had inspected it before me. Mother stood beside me holding a flashlight and complained that old apartments were dangerous. She never connected the damaged wiring to years of delaying repairs while paying deposits for Sungo's businesses. I fixed the dangerous connection, refused the unrelated bill, and left before dinner. Sumi met me outside. She had received an internship offer from a prestigious architecture firm, but needed a laptop. She did not ask me for one. She had applied for an equipment grant and was waiting for the result. I wanted to buy the best laptop immediately. The system warned that using wealth to reward perceived loyalty could turn kindness into a test neither of us had agreed to take. Instead, I helped her compare grants, refurbished models, and campus rentals. 2 weeks later, she earned the grant. When her laptop arrived, she called me first. Not mother. Not Sungo. Me. The happiness felt cleaner because I had not purchased it. Sungo found a new business. He began selling investment packages in neighborhood energy storage, claiming he had insider access to Moro grid technology. His company, Family Volt, promised guaranteed monthly returns and used photographs of our installations without permission. He recruited relatives, mother's friends, and small shop owners. Family Volt's brochures copied our language about community ownership while removing every safeguard. Residents saw smiling neighbors, green energy icons, and guaranteed income. The contracts quietly placed all risk on the investors. I sent a cease and desist letter without revealing my ownership. Sungo posted it online and claimed a large corporation was bullying a family entrepreneur. Mother called me and praised Sungo for finally building something real. She asked whether I could invest 10 million won to demonstrate family trust. I told her Family Volt had no licensed technology, no utility contract, and impossible returns. She accused jealousy. Sumi secretly attended one sales presentation and recorded Sungo telling investors that his younger brother worked directly under Moro Grid's founder. He implied I had given him private approval. That lie connected my name to the fraud. I confronted him at a rented hotel conference room after the guests left. Sungo smiled and said I should be grateful he had made my low-level job sound important. Sungo believed confidence was evidence. He walked around the empty conference room, rehearsing how Family Volt would become larger than Moro Grid, though he could not explain battery degradation, grid balancing, or insurance coverage. I told him to refund every investor. He asked what power I had to demand it. I almost answered. The system displayed, disclosure motivated by domination detected, visibility tax pending. I stayed silent. Sungo interpreted silence as weakness and expanded Family Volt into 3 cities. People invested retirement savings because he used family language instead of financial language. He called packages community circles, returns shared blessings, and contracts trust pledges. Several early investors were people who had once lent mother grocery money. Sungo used those old relationships as proof that refusing him meant refusing the community. He converted social trust into financial collateral. Ariam discovered the copied installation photos during a safety review. She asked why my brother appeared in the campaign. I admitted Sungo was using my name. I did not admit I could end the scheme with one founder statement. Ariam asked whether management knew. I said yes. She asked why management had not acted publicly. I said legal teams were gathering evidence. That was partly true and mostly cowardice. Family Volt installed cheap, imported batteries in a basement beneath a crowded wedding hall. The units had no proper cooling and were connected by unlicensed workers. The wedding hall manager had accepted the installation because Family Volt offered free backup power and a promotional partnership. Nobody independently inspected the equipment. Cheap confidence had moved faster than regulated competence. One battery overheated during a weekend event. Smoke filled the storage room, but sprinklers contained it before anyone was seriously harmed. News reports linked Family Volt to Moro Grid because Sungo had repeatedly used my employment connection. Moro Grid's municipal partners demanded answers. Residents questioned whether our safety claims were real. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Haben told me anonymity had become a liability. Eugen said my family relationship created a material conflict that had to be disclosed to directors and regulators. The emergency board included municipal officials who had defended our anonymity as protection from political pressure. Now they argued the same secrecy prevented accountability. Both statements were true, and neither canceled the other. I revealed everything to the board. Ariam learned from a formal conflict notice that the technician she supervised owned 58% of Moro Grid and had been a billionaire for months. She did not look impressed. She looked humiliated. After the meeting, she asked how many times I had listened to her discuss rent, groceries, career risk, and the mysterious founder while knowing I could buy the building. Ariam placed the conflict notice on the table between us. Her hands were steady, but she spoke more formally than she ever had in the field. Every title I had hidden suddenly entered the room at once. I said I never wanted money to change how she treated me. She replied that I had changed how she was allowed to understand me. That sentence damaged me more than my family's demands ever had because it was accurate. I told her about the system rule without explaining the supernatural screen. I said revealing wealth to secure affection could corrupt relationships. She asked whether hiding wealth to study people was less corrupt. I had no answer. Ariam transferred to another operations team until the conflict review ended. She refused my apology dinner because she did not want gratitude, romance, and employment mixed together. The system issued no punishment. It displayed one message. Trust cannot be audited without consent. For months, I had treated secrecy as protection. Part of it had become an experiment. I watched who called, who helped, who demanded, and who stayed. Nobody knew they were being tested. I reviewed months of conversations and found moments where I had encouraged people to speak freely while withholding the fact that I controlled their employer. I had collected honesty under conditions they did not understand. I had hated my family for turning relationships into accounts. Then I had created a private ledger of my own. The board voted to reveal MoroGrid's founder publicly before FamilyVault's fraud contaminated every contract. I agreed, even though disclosure would freeze new system opportunities for an unknown period. The press conference took place at Hatem Apartments, where the first restored batteries still powered emergency systems. Mrs. Kim Boksoon stood beside the resident council. Habin represented software employees. Eugen represented the holding trust. I stood behind a plain podium, wearing the same work jacket from the basement. Hatem's basement had been cleaned and repainted, but the original rust marks remained on the floor. Mrs. Kim insisted the press conference happen there, so the company's origin could not be replaced by a polished headquarters story. I announced that I founded and controlled MoroGrid. The reporters shouted before I reached the second sentence. I explained GridNest, the resident revenue model, the national contract, and my hidden role as a field technician. Then I disclosed that my brother's company had no license, partnership, investment, approval, or access to our technology. MoroGrid filed fraud claims and created a restitution channel for FamilyVault investors funded first by seized company assets and only later by a capped corporate contribution approved by independent directors. I refused to rescue every loss with personal money. Doing so would make victims whole faster, but it would also allow Sungo to argue the family billionaire had guaranteed him indirectly. Eugen designed the restitution channel to separate urgent assistance from final legal claims. Victims could receive temporary housing, food support, and counseling without signing away the right to pursue Sungo later. The distinction angered people who had lost savings. One elderly investor asked why my principles mattered more than her rent. I told her they did not. We advanced emergency housing support through a public fund without purchasing her claim or requiring silence. The system marked the decision, value restored without ownership of gratitude. Sungo held his own press conference from Mother's apartment. He said MoroGrid existed because my family had supported me for years. He displayed childhood photos and claimed I had promised to invest before abandoning him. Mother sat beside him and cried. She said a good son would have revealed success before strangers. She accused me of watching the family struggle while secretly becoming rich. Mother's tears were real. So was the way Sungo positioned the camera to capture them. Our family had always contained genuine emotion. The problem was how easily he converted it into pressure. That accusation was not entirely false. I had continued paying only basic obligations while letting them believe I remained poor. I had hidden wealth partly to protect myself and partly to see what they would do. Sumi refused to appear at Sungo's press conference. She released a short statement saying my money did not excuse secrecy, but Sungo's forged applications and false claims were still his responsibility. She disappointed both sides equally, which was how I knew she had written it herself. FamilyVault collapsed within days. Police froze accounts. Records showed Sungo used new investments to pay earlier returns and spent company money on wedding deposits, imported furniture, and a leased sports car. Sumi's statement cost her relatives, classmates, and online followers. People demanded she choose a side completely. She refused because truth had already been damaged by everyone turning relationships into teams. Mother had invested her apartment deposit. She called me at midnight and asked me to fix it. I said I would ensure she had safe housing, food, and legal representation. I would not replace the entire deposit privately. She asked what use a billionaire's son was if his mother could lose her home. I replied that being her son did not make me insurance for decisions hidden from me. She said I had become cruel. Maybe I had become capable of letting consequences reach people I loved. Those were not always the same thing. Sumi moved mother into a smaller rental near campus, using emergency support from the restitution program. Mother complained about every room, then quietly asked Sumi whether I had eaten. The new rental lacked the large dining table where mother had controlled family meetings. In the smaller kitchen, she had to ask before entering Sumi's room because every boundary was now physically visible. It was the first question about me that did not contain a transfer request. I wanted to treat it as proof of love. I stopped myself. One question was one question. Sungo was charged with fraud, identity misuse, and unlicensed energy installation. He blamed me until prosecutors showed messages where he described me as a useful idiot who would repay everything once pressured. He accepted a plea agreement requiring asset surrender, restitution work, and several years in prison. Before sentencing, he asked to meet me. The plea agreement required Sungo to identify recruiters, disclose investor lists, and record educational material explaining how emotional language had hidden financial risk. He hated the requirement more than prison because it forced him to name his methods. He looked smaller without expensive clothes and presentation screens. He said if I had told him I was rich earlier, he would never have created Family Vault. I asked whether that meant he would have respected me or simply chosen a larger amount to demand. He said families were supposed to share success. I agreed. Then I asked when he had shared failure without assigning me the bill. He had no answer. Sungo asked whether I had ever loved him. I said yes, which was why saying no had taken so long. The system did not reward the sentence. Mother attended financial counseling as part of the housing program. She hated the counselor, hated the budget, and hated learning that my childhood transfers had covered more than half the household's discretionary spending. The counselor asked Mother to calculate how much money I had transferred since turning 18. She stopped halfway through and accused the calculator of being wrong. Numbers became unacceptable once they contradicted sacrifice. For years, she had described my money as small contributions and Sungo's promises as future success. The numbers reversed her story. She apologized first for the forged applications because the legal documents gave her language. Apologizing for emotional pressure took longer. I did not demand a complete confession. I also stopped accepting partial apologies as permission to restore old access. Sumi graduated and joined a firm designing low-income housing around energy-sharing systems. She refused a position at Moro Grid until she had 3 years of independent experience. Sumi spent her first independent salary repairing the roof above Mother's new apartment. She told me only afterward because she did not want the decision interpreted as proof she had replaced me as the responsible child. I offered to invest in one of her future projects only through the same review process as everyone else. She said that was annoyingly fair. Ariam returned to headquarters after the conflict investigation established that I would no longer directly control her evaluation, salary, or promotion. She requested a meeting with a human resources observer present. I agreed. She said my public disclosure had been necessary, but did not repair what I hid from her. She had shared financial fears and personal opinions while I controlled information that shaped every conversation. The observer recorded every sentence, which made the conversation slow and uncomfortable. That discomfort protected Ariam from being required to manage my guilt in private. I apologized without explaining why my intentions had been better than the result. She asked whether the system, or whatever rule I followed, still prevented me from revealing wealth for affection. I said the rule had never forbidden honesty. It had forbidden using money as leverage. I had chosen a broader interpretation because it felt safer. Ariam said safety for one person could become uncertainty for everyone else. We did not begin dating after that meeting. We began rebuilding ordinary trust. I disclosed conflicts before projects. She challenged expansion plans publicly. We ate with crews rather than alone. When I paid, I used the shared meal account like everyone else. We rebuilt trust through small, predictable actions rather than confessions. I stopped appearing unannounced at her field sites. She stopped assuming every executive delay was manipulation and checked the documents first. 6 months later, she invited me to a film and specified that the invitation was personal, not operational. I accepted and transferred the ticket price. She returned it with a note saying fairness did not require removing every gift from human life. The system displayed no warning. Moro Grid continued growing. We connected hospitals, schools, apartment cooperatives, and rural factories into a national energy-sharing network. Hospitals joined only after demanding local override authority and public failure reporting. Schools required parent committees. Rural factories wanted guarantees that sole emergencies would not drain their batteries first. National growth became thousands of separate negotiations. The company crossed a $10 billion valuation after a typhoon damaged coastal transmission lines, and our local microgrids kept shelters powered. I became wealthier than anyone in my family had imagined. Publicly, my finances were now disclosed through the company trust, tax reports, and conflict rules. The system resumed offering recovery opportunities, but the messages changed. It no longer highlighted only abandoned assets. It highlighted neglected people inside successful systems, technicians without promotion paths, residents excluded from energy decisions, communities carrying infrastructure risk. The system's new highlights appeared above technicians whose ideas had been ignored, not above abandoned machinery. It showed how much economic value disappeared when organizations treated rank as intelligence. I understood that hidden value was not always property waiting to be claimed. Sometimes it was expertise waiting to be heard. We converted part of my founder's stake into a community energy trust. Residents, workers, municipal funds, and emergency service representatives received voting rights. Some investors said I was giving away control. I had learned that control, which could never be shared, eventually turned every relationship into dependence. Mother visited Moro Grid headquarters for the first time 2 years after the scandal. She wore her best coat and brought fruit for the entire office because she did not know how many people worked there. Mother practiced the visit in front of Sumi, including how long to wait before asking about money. She still arrived 2 hours early because anxiety had become part of her punctuality. She stared at the building, the control room, and my name on a small founder plaque. Then she asked whether I had bought the building. I said the company owned it. She asked what I owned personally. I told her enough. Her old habits appeared in her eyes like someone reaching for a familiar light switch. She wanted a number, a house, a promise, a way to calculate access. Instead, she asked whether the rooftop room had really leaked as badly as I claimed. I said worse. She apologized for never visiting. That apology mattered because it concerned where I had lived, not what I could now provide. Mother and I developed a relationship with limits. She received no private allowance. We shared meals twice a month. Emergency needs went through transparent family agreements reviewed with the counselor. Our family agreement listed what counted as an emergency, who verified the expense, and how repayment worked. Mother called it cold. After 6 months without a financial explosion, she admitted cold systems sometimes protected warm relationships. Sometimes she complained that strangers received more from my trust than relatives did. I explained that the trust funded public value, not blood priority. Sometimes she understood. Sometimes she did not. Love did not transform her into a different person. Sungo completed a financial literacy program in prison and began writing letters. The first 6 contained excuses. The 7th contained a list of people he had harmed without mentioning me. Sungo's 7th letter named the elderly investors, the wedding hall manager, unlicensed installers, and Sumi. He did not ask whether I forgave him. That absence made the letter more believable. I replied to that one. After release, he worked for a restitution nonprofit that monitored fraudulent franchises. The board knew his record and limited his authority. He was good at recognizing manipulation because he had practiced it professionally. Some victims refused to work with him. Their refusal remained valid. Redemption did not create a right to trust. Sumi eventually led an architecture project combining affordable housing with resident-owned battery networks. Moro Grid invested after independent review and accepted a minority stake. Sumi's project board included future tenants with equal votes on battery revenue. Developers complained that residents slowed design decisions. She replied that living with a building was a longer commitment than constructing it. At the opening, reporters asked whether her billionaire brother made the project possible. She answered that my company supplied capital, but tenants, engineers, public land, and years of design made it real. I was proud that she corrected the story without denying my contribution. Ariam became Chief Resilience Officer through a board process I did not control. She oversaw emergency planning and had authority to suspend expansion when safety reviews failed. Ariam's promotion interview included union representatives, municipal partners, and 2 neighborhood council members. I watched through a delayed recording after the vote, learning the result at the same time as everyone else. We began dating long before that promotion and disclosed the relationship to the board. She insisted I recuse myself from every decision involving her department. Haben said romance had created more paperwork than the national grid contract. Ariam and I never combined finances quickly. She kept her apartment. I kept a modest home near the operations center. We discussed wealth the way other couples discussed difficult relatives, openly, repeatedly, and without expecting one conversation to solve it. When we married, we created no dramatic merger. My founder stake remained inside the trust. Her career remained independent. Gifts had limits large enough to be generous and clear enough not to become authority. Mother wanted a luxury wedding because the family had suffered enough embarrassment. We held a small ceremony at Hatem Apartments instead. Mother arrived at the wedding carrying a list of relatives who should receive special seating. Mrs. Kim replaced the list with a resident lottery and assigned Mother a normal table beside 2 retired electricians. Mrs. Kim Boksoon signed as a witness. Haben cried during the vows and blamed seasonal allergies. Attorney Eugen checked the marriage contract during dessert. Sungo attended quietly and left before reporters arrived. Sumi designed temporary solar lights for the courtyard. Residents received the event space fee. The system marked the location where it had first activated. A final message appeared. Affection cannot be proven through deprivation, secrecy, wealth, or sacrifice. Below it was a question: who truly loves you? For years, I had believed the system would eventually provide an answer. Instead, the screen offered no names. It displayed, love is not an asset class. Observe patterns. Communicate boundaries. Accept uncertainty. Then the system closed. For days after the system vanished, I opened my phone expecting green outlines and hidden opportunities. Ordinary screens felt strangely flat. I had to ask engineers what they noticed instead of waiting for supernatural confirmation. I panicked more than I expected. The system had guided every major opportunity, but it had also become the private authority I consulted whenever people disappointed me. Without it, I had to judge value without green outlines and warnings. Ariam noticed my expression during the wedding photographs. I told her the system was gone. She asked whether that meant I would finally stop staring at my phone whenever someone offered dessert. I laughed. Moro Grid survived without new supernatural opportunities. We had engineers, residents, contracts, safety committees, public data, and enough accumulated knowledge to identify neglected value ourselves. Our first major decision without the system involved replacing thousands of aging cells before failure. The investment produced no dramatic reward. It simply prevented future problems, which was how mature infrastructure was supposed to work. That was perhaps the system's final lesson. A structure that required one chosen person to keep receiving secret instructions was not sustainable. 10 years after Hatem Apartments, distributed energy networks covered most Korean cities. Residents earned income from storage, hospitals maintained independent emergency power, and technicians held licensing rights once controlled only by utilities. Moro Grid remained profitable, though competitors copied our technology. We focused on governance and reliability instead of pretending invention alone created value. Financial magazines kept estimating my wealth. The numbers moved with markets. Some years I was worth more than $10 billion. Other years, less. Financial magazines described every decrease in my estimated wealth as loss, even when the change came from transferring shares into resident trusts. Markets measured ownership more easily than security, voice, or resilience. My family no longer received automatic transfers. Mother called to ask how I was before discussing expenses. Sometimes she succeeded in keeping the order. Sometimes I reminded her. Sungo never regained the lifestyle he had performed. He rented a small apartment and repaid victims from every salary. Sumi earned more than she once believed possible and still compared laptop prices for weeks. Ariam knew exactly what I owned and still argued with me about leaving lights on. The people who loved me were not the ones who never wanted anything. Everyone wanted things: time, help, recognition, money, patience, safety. Ariam wanted my time, Sumi wanted fair investment, Mother wanted reassurance, and even Sungo wanted a path back into society. None of those desires automatically became exploitation. The pattern appeared in how they responded when the answer was no. The difference was whether they treated my refusal as information or betrayal. I had hidden wealth hoping to discover perfect love untouched by self-interest. What I found were imperfect people with patterns, choices, and changing boundaries. The poor boy became a billionaire and hid it from his family. But the real freedom was not learning who loved him without money. It was learning that love, which required unlimited access to him, was never made genuine by paying the bill.